The pregnant sister-in-law exposed. My husband's double life. Before we start, please like and subscribe. Chapter 1, A Second Chance, or the Worst Deja Vu? I woke up with a gasp so sharp it could have split the silence in two. My chest heaved, my lungs desperate for air, and my hands clawed at the silk sheets twisted around my legs like shackles. For a moment, I was sure I was suffocating, not from lack of oxygen, but from the crushing weight of deja vu. The nightmare had felt so real. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the cold, empty nothingness that followed, it clung to me like a second skin. But then I felt it, the softness of my pillow beneath my cheek, damp with sweat, my heart hammered against my ribs like a caged animal. But I was here. I was alive. I bolted upright, my gaze darting around the room. The morning light streamed in through the curtains, painting my surroundings in hues of gold. I knew this room, this bed, this life. No, it couldn't be. I scrambled out of bed, nearly tripping over my own feet as I rushed to the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, and for a second, I didn't recognize her. Gone was the haggard, hollow-eyed woman I had been just hours ago. No dark circles etched beneath my eyes, no bruises hastily covered with concealer, no bitterness pulling down the corners of my mouth. My skin was smooth, radiant even. My hair fell in soft waves around my shoulders. My eyes, once dull and lifeless, now sparkled with youth and clarity. I ran my fingers over my face, barely believing it. It had worked. Somehow, someway, I had been pulled back, reborn, to a moment before my life shattered into pieces. Before the lies, the betrayal, the cruel laughter of the people I had trusted most, I had been given a second chance. Then the doorbell rang. The sound was a dagger to my heart, sharp and familiar. I froze, the memory of that same ring, tearing through my mind like a freight train. Not again. My legs moved on autopilot, carrying me out of the bedroom and down the hall. Every step felt heavier, like wading through quicksand. When I reached the front door, I paused, my fingers trembling on the handle. Evelyn. It's me, Rhea. That voice. That sweet, fake voice. It sent a shiver down my spine, my jaw clenching so hard I thought my teeth might crack. In my previous life, I had thrown the door open without hesitation. I had smiled, embraced her, welcomed her into my home with open arms. Rhea, my poor, pregnant sister-in-law, crying crocodile tears about how she had nowhere else to go. And I had believed her. God help me. I had believed her. Big mistake. Huge. But this time, things would be different. I took a deep breath, plastering on a bright smile. The kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes, but would fool anyone who wasn't looking too closely. I opened the door, and there she was, Rhea Sinclair, in all her manipulative, saccharine glory. She stood on my doorstep, her designer suitcase in one hand, and her other hand resting protectively on her small baby bump. Her wide, doe-like eyes sparkled with fake gratitude, her lips pulled into a trembling smile that could have won her an Oscar. Evelyn, she breathed, her voice quivering with emotion. Thank goodness you're here. I didn't know where else to go. Her bottom lip trembled, her shoulders shaking as if she were holding back sobs. Her hair, perfectly curled, framed her face like a halo. She looked every bit the picture of innocence and vulnerability. I almost laughed. Almost. Oh Rhea, I cooed, matching her tone with just enough warmth to sell it. You poor thing. Come in, come in. I stepped aside, waving her in. She waddled past me, dragging her suitcase behind her, and glancing around like a queen inspecting her kingdom. I caught the faintest flicker of triumph in her eyes, a glint so small most people would have missed it. But I wasn't most people. Not anymore. I closed the door behind her, my hand lingering on the handle as I fought the urge to slam it shut. I could practically feel her smirking on the inside. So sure she had me fooled. Little did she know, this time, I wasn't the trusting fool she had played before. No, this time, I was the one holding the cards. Chapter 2, The Perfect Hostess with a Hidden Agenda. Let me tell you something about Rhea Sinclair. To the outside world, she's an angel, a soft, doe-eyed, golden-haired girl next door type who could charm the birds out of the trees with a simple smile. She's the one who volunteers at animal shelters, bakes cookies for charity, and tears up watching The Notebook. The kind of woman who'd cry at puppy commercials. Sweet, selfless, uplifting, but underneath all that sugar is a layer of venom so potent it could kill you with a single drop. The kind of venom that seeps into your veins before you even know it's there, paralyzing you with false trust until it's too late. She played innocent while secretly plotting my downfall, stealing my husband, my money, and even my family's company. And Mason, my darling, charming, infuriating husband? He fell for her act hook, line, and sinker. But not this time. This time, I was the one holding all the cards. The first few days of Ria's stay were interesting, to say the least. I can't believe you're doing all this for me. Ria cooed, eyes wide with feigned innocence as she flopped dramatically onto the plush bed in the guest suite, like she'd just run a marathon, or been shot in the leg. Mason told me you were a saint, but this is too much. She made a point of letting out a long, exaggerated sigh, one that seemed to come from the very depths of her fake, fragile soul. It was the kind of sigh a martyr might give before offering themselves up for the greater good. It was all an act, and I'd seen it 1,000 times before. But this time I wasn't playing the fool. Mason's always been a sweet talker, I replied lightly, my voice airy and unbothered, though I was seething on the inside. He was always good at charming people, especially women, while pulling the rug out from under their feet when they weren't looking. Too bad for him. I wasn't falling for it anymore. Whoa, he really is, she agreed, that sly little smile tugging at the corners of her lips, as if she were in on some deliciously dark secret. You're so lucky to have him? I nearly choked on the laugh that wanted to escape. Lucky? Sure, if lucky meant marrying a man who would cheat on you with his own sister-in-law, sabotage your business for his own gain, and leave you feeling empty and betrayed. Lucky me, indeed. But instead of letting her see the truth behind my eyes, I just smiled. That same smile, the one that never quite reached my eyes, but made people think I was all sweetness and light. You're right, I said, my voice sugary sweet. I'm very lucky. Over the next few days, I played the perfect hostess. I was the picture of grace and hospitality, the ideal wife. I cooked Ria's favorite meals, served them with a smile, and offered her a cozy nursery in the villa's guest room. I told her she could stay as long as she needed, making sure to emphasize that she was a part of the family now. She lapped it all up, naturally. She drank in my kindness like a kitten drinking milk, innocent and needy, lapping at the edge of my patience, testing how far she could push before I snapped. But what she didn't realize was that every meal I cooked, every kind word I spoke, every casual gesture of friendship was all part of my plan. A plan that had been set in motion the moment I saw her standing on my doorstep with that smug, self-righteous look in her eyes. I wasn't just being nice for the sake of hospitality. I was laying the groundwork, building a trap that she wouldn't even see coming. I'd already installed hidden cameras in every room of the villa. Discreet, unobtrusive, and clever, just like the trap I was setting. I made sure the lenses were placed in spots where no one would think to look, like the clock in the hallway, the vase on the mantel, the mirror in the guest bathroom. And then, just to be extra careful, I hired a new maid. Her name was Marta. The woman was a bit older, maybe in her mid-40s, and had a stern, no-nonsense look about her. She had zero tolerance for nonsense, zero patience for the kind of manipulative games Ria was playing. Marta had an uncanny knack for eavesdropping without making it obvious, and she knew how to gather information without drawing attention. I briefed her quickly when she started, though I didn't tell her the full extent of my plans. She didn't need to know everything, just enough to make sure Ria didn't slip past her radar. And Marta was a pro. I kept playing my part, smiling, laughing, cooking. I would leave Ria to her resting in the guest room while I wandered around the villa, acting the perfect hostess. But all the while, my mind was whirring with thoughts of how best to catch her, expose her, destroy everything she and Mason had worked so hard to ruin. Ria thought she was walking into a sanctuary, a quiet, peaceful place where she could relax and recover from her stressful life. Little did she know, the sanctuary she'd stepped into was more like a lion's den, with me as the queen of this little kingdom. I knew she was testing me. I could feel the undercurrents of her intentions, like the subtle scent of smoke before a fire starts. She didn't make it obvious, but every small thing she did was a clue, a breadcrumb I was carefully collecting. She'd go on about how she didn't want to inconvenience me, but then drop hints about her hard life, and how much she deserved a break. Every compliment she paid me was laced with a hint of superiority. The way she'd throw out a casual comment about Mason's affectionate nature, just a little jab at my heart to see if I'd react. Every tiny thing was a test, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing I saw right through her. No. This time, I'd let her think she was winning. I'd let her think she was in control. And then, when the time was right, I'd pull the rug out from under her. Chapter 3. The seeds of suspicion. It didn't take long for Ria to start testing the waters. She was subtle at first, sly little moves, like a cat creeping closer to its prey. At first, I thought I might have imagined it. But no, I knew Ria's type. I had lived through her manipulations once, and I wasn't going to let her pull the same tricks again. It started small, She borrowed one of my diamond necklaces without asking. I found it draped carelessly around her neck one morning, like she was wearing it to flaunt her newfound sense of entitlement. I asked her about it, my tone as sweet as honey, and she gave me some half-hearted excuse about not having time to ask. I didn't respond, just gave her a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Then came the passive-aggressive comments. She started picking apart my home, criticizing my decorating choices as though they were offensive to her delicate sensibilities. The throw pillows I'd chosen were too much, the artwork on the walls too gaudy. As if she could do better. I bit my tongue, but deep down, I was smiling. It was exactly what I wanted her to do. She was showing me her true colors, colors I was ready to paint for the whole world to see. By the end of the week, she had crossed the line. There she was, lounging by the pool in one of my designer swimsuits, sipping a martini, as if she owned the place. She looked so comfortable, so entitled, basking in the sun like the villa was hers to command. It was almost laughable. I let her do it. Why? Because every move she made was being recorded. Every stolen trinket, every backhanded insult, every condescending glance, it was all ammunition. Every little thing was another piece of the puzzle I was assembling. Mason, of course, was oblivious to it all. He dropped by the villa occasionally, his version of checking in, acting like the loving husband and doting brother-in-law. He had that charming smile plastered on his face, always so quick to laugh at his own jokes, and spin some elaborate tale about how well his business was doing. I played along, grinning like a good wife, nodding like the supportive sister-in-law. I laughed at his jokes, his little stories, all while secretly plotting his downfall. I had a plan, and that plan required patience. I could afford to let Rhea have her fun for now. After all, I had all the time in the world to make her regret it. One evening, I overheard something I shouldn't have. I'd been wandering the villa, pretending to adjust some decor in the study, when I heard low voices coming from the other side of the door. I knew Mason was in there. He'd been spending a lot of time in that study lately, going over documents, pretending to work while Rhea whispered in his ear. The kind of whispering that made me suspicious. I couldn't hear everything. The words were muffled, but there were two that cut through the air like a knife. Business takeover, and divorce settlement. My blood turned to ice. Every muscle in my body tensed, every instinct screaming at me that this was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment that confirmed everything I'd feared. Mason and Rhea were in on it. They had been plotting against me, planning my downfall, taking what they thought was rightfully theirs. I wanted to burst in there, confront them, tear them apart with my words, but I forced myself to stay calm. The rage burning inside me was intense, but it was also my fuel. I had to keep my cool if I was going to take them down properly. That night, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had been putting off. "Nolan," I said when the line clicked, his deep voice immediately familiar. "I need you to dig up everything you can on Mason and Rhea. And I mean everything." There was a pause on the other end before he spoke, his voice smooth and confident. "Consider it done." I liked that about Nolan. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need explanations. He just did the job. Chapter 4, The Fall of the Facade. By the time Nolan delivered his findings, I had enough dirt on Mason and Rhea to bury them 10 times over. It was like opening a treasure chest full of secrets. But the cherry on top, a video? Rhea had been tampering with the villa's balcony glass. I knew what she had planned. She was the one who had changed the glass panel, making it dangerously unstable. She had planned to stage an accidental fall, just like in my previous life. She was going to kill me, make it look like I slipped, just to claim my spot in Mason's life, and my inheritance. I could hardly believe it, but there it was. Rhea's hand caught in the cookie jar, and it was the most glorious thing I'd ever seen. Nolan leaned back in his chair as we reviewed the footage. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "So, what's the plan?" I grinned. I had been waiting for this moment. The moment I could take back everything that had been stolen from me. Whoa, you'll see. First, I took to the internet. The moment Rhea's betrayal was exposed, I knew it would spread like wildfire. I couldn't wait to watch it all burn. So, I anonymously leaked a video, one of Mason and Rhea kissing in my kitchen. It was a simple video, filmed, without either of them knowing. But it was enough. The reaction? Catastrophic. Within hours, the hashtags #DirtyDonovans and #PregnantHomewrecker were trending. News outlets picked up the story, and social media exploded with outrage. The public backlash was just the beginning. Mason's perfect, polished reputation was starting to crack. Then came the second part of my plan. I confronted Rhea with the footage of her tampering with the balcony glass. She turned pale as a sheet, her confidence faltering for the first time since she'd walked through my door. You can't prove I was going to hurt you," she stammered, backing away from me. "Whoa, sweetie," I said, patting her cheek in mock sympathy. "I don't need to prove anything." Her eyes flickered with confusion and panic as I let that sink in. "I just need to let Mason see this." Her face twisted in terror. The facade was finally cracking. And it was beautiful. Chapter 5. Checkmate. The air was thick with tension, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The balcony, my once peaceful retreat, had become the stage for the final act. Rhea stood there, her eyes wild with desperation, her hands trembling as she faced me. There was no pretending anymore. No facade of innocence, no act. She was caught, cornered, and in the same position she'd put me in once before. But this time, I wasn't the one teetering on the edge of that balcony. She took a step toward me, her voice hissing, "You think you've won, don't you?" I stood my ground, my heart pounding, but my mind crystal clear. "I don't think. I know." Her eyes burned with a fury I had seen only once before. The betrayal in them was raw, but now I could see the fear creeping in, fear that I would do exactly what she had planned for me. "You're nothing but a weak, miserable woman," she spat, taking another step closer, her body a coiled spring ready to strike. I could almost feel her calculating the final move, ready to push me into the abyss, just as she had in my previous life. She reached for me, her hand aimed to shove me into the dark night, where I would disappear, where I would die. But this time, I was ready. With a swift sidestep, I let her lunge toward me, and before she knew it, the ground beneath her gave way. She lost her balance, her body tilting dangerously over the edge. The scream that escaped her mouth was high-pitched, desperate, as she flailed in the air before crashing to the ground below with a sickening thud. I stared down at her crumpled body, my heart hammering in my chest. The silence that followed was deafening. Was it cruel that I felt satisfied? I couldn't deny it. I'd watched her destroy my life once, seen her manipulate everyone around her, seen her worm her way into everything I had worked so hard to build. And now, in this moment, she was gone. The power had shifted. The weight I'd carried for so long was finally lifting from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt alive. But Mason wouldn't let it end like that. Whoa, no. The first chance he got, he rushed to the scene, his face contorted in anger and confusion. "You did this," he yelled, pointing at me as though I were the villain of this tragic tale. I couldn't help but smirk. Oh, how predictable he was. He was still in love with the idea of Rhea, still wrapped up in his illusions of her purity. He couldn't see the truth even if it was staring him in the face. But it didn't matter anymore. I had what I needed. The footage of Rhea tampering with the balcony glass was irrefutable. She had planned to kill me. And now, in her desperation, she had paid the ultimate price. As the police arrived, Mason tried to twist the story, to point the finger at me, but the truth came flooding in, relentless. Rhea's tampered glass, her calculated behavior, and Mason's own shady dealings, all of it unraveled before his eyes. The mansion that had once been a symbol of his power and control crumbled. He was exposed. Every fraud, every shady deal, every lie came to light. The downfall of the Donovan Empire was swift and unforgiving. Mason lost everything. His wealth, his name, his reputation. And he deserved every bit of it. Epilogue. A new beginning with Rhea gone and Mason disgraced. I stood at the helm of my reclaimed life, piecing together the wreckage they had left behind. Every step forward was a small victory, every breath a reminder that I was no longer bound by their lies, their manipulation. I was free, finally, truly free. It wasn't just the freedom from Mason's grasp, nor the satisfaction of seeing Rhea get what she deserved. It was the liberation of finally taking control of my own fate, of carving out my own path, without the shadow of their deceit hanging over me. Nolan Carter was there through it all. His presence had become a constant in my life. His quiet support, his steady confidence, it was something I'd come to rely on more than I ever thought I would. And somewhere along the way, in the midst of revenge and tragedy, I realized that what had started as a professional relationship had quietly blossomed into something more. The bond between us had deepened. I could feel it. Every time he looked at me with that knowing gaze, every time his hand brushed against mine as he handed over yet another piece of evidence, or offered a word of encouragement. But Nolan wasn't just my ally. No, he was my equal. He didn't pity me. He didn't treat me like I was a fragile woman broken by the past. He saw me for who I was, strong, intelligent, and capable of anything. Together, we could build something from the ashes of my former life. And one evening, as we stood together, looking out over the newly reclaimed villa, the place that had once been my prison, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope for the future. Hope for the new life I was going to create. I was standing on my balcony. The very same place Rhea had planned to take everything from me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The view stretched endlessly in front of me, wide and open. I was free, and I was ready for whatever came next. With Nolan by my side, the world suddenly felt like a much smaller place. But one thing was certain: I wasn't done yet. The game had only just begun. And they would see me rise.